Welcome to the Actuarial Development Institute podcast. I'm Charles Johnson, and I'm here with Aree Bly. Aree, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Aree Bly, and I am a actuary, probably a former actuary at this point because I don't do the technical work anymore. But after 25 years as an actuary in healthcare, I now have my own business. As a facilitator, a speaker, a coach, I authored a book called The Sustainable Brain and am exploring what comes after the spreadsheets.
Does anything come after the spread? I thought that
No, it doesn't because you keep using them. You still use them.
It's an interesting question. Like, my brother was an Eagle Scout. We're always an Eagle Scout. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Is it the same with actuaries?
I think that's
Once
true
an
for
actuary,
actuaries. Yeah, your brain keeps working in the same way. You're still an analytical person. You still kind of put that framework on it. You look for patterns. You do not get away from all of the things that made you an actuary.
Yeah, I think the defining character, but one of the defining characteristics I always describe actuaries having is the ability to think probabilistically. And I like
Correct.
describing it like that because it's a non-intuitive human perception, right? Like humans tend to think about things in a definitive standpoint. They like to have certainty. Certainty provides comfort.
Right.
And in Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, one of the greatest economics books ever written, he says, we're just bad at it. But then he has like this caveat. He goes, unless on a professional level you assess uncertain probabilities for a living, you're bad at this. And I was like, oh, well, I do that.
Exactly. I have that skill.
Yeah. And so it's it's a permanent change in perspective that comes from becoming an actuary.
Yeah. It definitely trains you to look at things a little bit differently. My husband's an actuary too, and our kids get tired of hearing, it's possible but not probable. So yeah. But you think that way. It can both help you and hinder you when you're making decisions because you may try and overanalyze like what the likelihood of different outcomes are. Whereas I think if you were just kind of a black and white, like this is where I'm going, or trust your gut kind of person, it makes decisions a little bit easier sometimes.
When do you remember some of the thinking and perception that happened from before you were an actuary, and like how going through the exams in your early career changed the way you think of the world? Like, is there ever a moment, I guess, in your early life where it was like, oh, I see things differently than I did before because of what I've been trained on?
I think it shifted. So initially, I was just very good at math, which is very much a right answer, wrong answer kind of thing. So you know how to approach things. And then once I started getting into the actual statistics side of math, that's when you start seeing, oh, wait, there's more of a range. There's more of a spectrum of possibilities and trying to understand which end is more likely and what drives your location along all this. I think so it must have happened somewhere in late college, grad school, when I started really getting serious about, okay, what do I want to do and how do I get through exams? And then once you start working in the profession, you definitely start paying more attention, more on the so I started my career at Cigna, and I was working in financial reporting for a couple of years and pricing for a couple of years. I think the pricing side is a little bit more of the actuarial mindset. The financial reporting is a little bit more like the accounting side almost. Like how do you calculate the right reserves? How do you come up with these? There's a little wiggle room in some of them, obviously, but it seems like the pricing side was a little bit more focused on the actuarial, like what's really going to happen? What do we have to prepare for? How do we make sure that we're conservative but not too conservative, right?
That you made a statement that I thought was really interesting. That you had a strong math background, and that early in your math career, right? Like math is attractive because there's defined outcomes and answers. Can you walk me through your decision to become an actuary? I think it's an interesting time we live in now where the math skill set and background we had growing up is now in demand for so many different areas. How did you hear about the actuarial profession, and why did you pick it?
Well, it was not something I was aware of even as a young kid. So I didn't grow up wanting to be an actuary, but in high school, probably about the time that I took, whether it was the ACT or the SAT, the standard tests, and you get your score back, one of the local college professors noticed my math score and came out to my house and said, here's a list of careers that would align with someone who is very good at math. And actuarial science was one of the first ones. So I knew I didn't want to go into like research. I didn't want to become a professor. I did go through and get my master's degree, but I didn't want to stay in that world of academia. I wanted more hands-on experience. So yeah, I think I learned about it as a high school student, and then I went to a liberal arts college. So I didn't go to a college that had a actuarial program. There was one emeritus professor there who had some experience. He wasn't an actuary, but he had helped other students through the first couple of exams. So I met with him and studied with him. He kind of helped tutor me through some of the structure of the exams and how to think about them, because it's not the same as a regular math exam. You have to kind of approach them differently. And then I figured, since I was kind of coming out of college without a lot of connections, the university I went to didn't have connections with a lot of actuarial companies, insurance companies or consulting ones. So I hadn't had an internship. So I went ahead and went on to grad school, got my statistics master's, and then was able to get a little bit more of a foot in the door. So,
What college did you go to?
It's Augustana College. It's in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great little school, but not known for their actuarial science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder, as I think about this, so the reason I thought it was so interesting is that the actuarial profession provides some of that certainty, some of that almost mathematical certainty early in your career.
Yeah.
Where a lot of other professions, there isn't always a clear, like, if you do this, you move forward. And, there's not like this clear, almost stepwise expectation of, if I put in the right variables in, I get this specified outcome.
Yeah.
And in the actuarial world, unlike a lot of other math degrees in professions, I think there is that very clear, almost cause and effect of, if I pass the exams and I just meet expectations at work, I don't even have to knock things out of the park.
Right.
You're like, in year 2 you'll be promoted, and year 3 or 4 you'll get promoted again, up until you're at this fellowship level and you're an associate. But the other thing I was thinking about is math departments are very interesting. They're generally the largest department on college campus, and they train math skills in all these other professions, and yet like 75% of actuarial programs are in pure math degrees. So I almost wonder if it's a bit of a homing beacon of like, well, you didn't really want to do something else, but you definitely liked math, and it just so happened to be that there's this major in here.
Right.
And it pays well, and it has good job demand, and there's definitely hurdles that you mentioned that are like this mastery of self-education beyond classwork, which I think is very unique in early career professions like actuarial science. Just a thought. I hadn't really thought about that before, and why maybe some people struggle when they get out of this very rigorous, defined, almost mathematical progress to their career, and then they land in ambiguity.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to get through exams?
Let's see. I finished exams right at the end of 1999, and I came out of grad school in 95. Okay. So I
about 4
took
years
a couple.
After graduating.
Yeah, I had passed a few, and then it was about 4 or 5 years after that. So it was pretty steady progress. I actually chose my first role or my first company as a insurance company as opposed to consulting, because I knew myself. I knew that if you put all these shiny, interesting projects out there, I might want to say yes to that, and I wouldn't find as much time or make as much time to progress through the exams. So I made that deliberate choice to go into an organization that was structured to help you go through exams. There's not as much client pressure. There's a little bit more of a cyclical role that you're in. You know when your busy times are going to be. And there's, like I said earlier, I started at Cigna, and it was a huge program. You have 25 actuarial students hired every year. So you've kind of got a cohort of people that you're moving through exams with at the same time. And it's definitely nice to have that clear, relationship between you succeed in your exam and you get your bump in pay, you may get a new title, and then you achieve the next exam and you keep moving up the path. Where that gets us in trouble, though, is, I think you alluded to it, once you get to the end of that path, have we taught ourselves how now to make the decision of what comes next? Do we know how to listen to what we're actually interested in and to follow kind of our own nose into, do I want to be kind of a technical actuary and head down this way? Am I more of a strategic thinker? Do I want to head straight into leadership? What do I really want to do now that I've got this amazing base to stand on? Because that point when you get through the exams is when so much opens up and it can be a little bit overwhelming. We don't know how to, listen to all of the voices that are saying, oh, you should come do this, you should do that, as well as our own voice. It can be tricky. And I know I work with people now that, kind of get to that point and they're like, okay, now what do I do? Nobody's telling me. There's no syllabus anymore of what I want to do. But I think that's where, when I was going through that, I didn't realize it at the time, but I came from a fairly non-traditional area. I actually had a double major in math and accounting. I had a minor in foreign languages. I had all of these different interests. I even played with, coming out of high school, going into art because I loved art and I was good at that too. And I was like, okay, how do I can't make money over there. So actuarial won out over art. But if you go to the book Range by David Epstein, it's all about, how generalists, which is what I've always been, can succeed in, a world. We don't have to be the specialist. We don't have to be 10,000 hours of, one specific focus. And I always thought that hurt me in the past because I know a lot of actuaries that are very much, driven by one pursuit. They're very obsessed with kind of one aspect of it, which is great. It gives them a lot of success, but I didn't look like that. But what happened for me was my broad range of interests took me to work in international. It took me to consulting where I could leverage my interest and ability to kind of juggle a few different things. So I was able to find a way to make a career that fit who I was and how I, moved through life, as well as the experiences that I had. I could pull all of that together to create my own path.
It's interesting that you mentioned this idea of range, and then you also call out 10,000 hours. So it really came to a head, a little while ago for me. First, I'd read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, which is just a phenomenal book. And there are certain aspects to Grit that I definitely don't have. And, I think it's very much held up as like, okay, this is the standard of how you become great at something. And the thing that hit me a couple days ago is I was watching this video clip, and it was of 3 of the best chess players in the world. And they were asking them just like layman's information questions, like who is this artist? And like, who was the last president of the United States? Like just like stuff that any general person in the population should know. And they would just like get they were just getting them wrong.
Right.
And I think this points to this larger idea of sacrifice, right? You don't become the greatest at something, a massive technical expert, without inherently sacrificing progress in other areas. And likewise, you can't really be this well-rangey, diversely skilled person without giving up really deep expertise in one thing. And I think it's a balancing act that we need to navigate in our careers of like, how much do we want to lean into one expertise versus continue building up all these different areas that we have.
Right, right. And I think it's a different answer for everyone, which is good and bad because you have to figure it out on your own, right? And it may be different at different times. I think I've seen a lot of descriptions of, how to view your expertise. Sometimes it's like a T. You've got, a thin layer of expertise around a lot of different topics, and then you've gone deep in one. Or it's like an M, like you've got a couple different deep areas, but then the rest. Or, there's all these different ways that you can think about it. So think about, where your interest lies and where you do want to go deep and why you want to go deep on those. Sometimes it could be just so that you have a little bit more of an expertise in something, especially if you're going to, go into consulting. That gives you something to sell yourself through, right? And if it's, the generalized areas, that can lead you down kind of leadership paths. Like you can understand how all this fits together. You can take control and manage larger projects that involve a number of even non-actuarial partners because you have an ability to kind of see the bigger picture and communicate with non-analytical people and really understand how everything fits together. So think about like, what role do you like to play in your career and how do you build kind of those specific skills that'll take you to that point?
Yeah, I want to go back to your career and kind of have you reflect on that. So you mentioned when you graduated at college that you picked an insurance company because you wanted the exams, but it sounded like you knew that, I am interested in this consulting world. I'm interested on this idea of working on different interesting projects and working with clients. So first, when you were in the insurance world and going through the exams, you finished, the insurance in large corporations generally provides a lot of structure, progress, where consulting companies, it's much more, I don't know if lack of structure is the right word, but there's not as much like clear path to get to, the next level.
Right.
And so kind of walk me through leaving insurance and what your impression was there. And then the experience of starting in the consulting world and maybe some challenges you ran into when you made that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. It happened. So I spent probably 7 years with Cigna, and then I moved across the country to Colorado, and I stayed in insurance at that point. I worked for a different insurance company, was still doing very similar work to what I had done, the HMO pricing and whatnot at that point. But what came along was actually an opportunity to work at an insurance company that was going to be doing a lot more work internationally. And that piqued my curiosity. So I think at some point, early on in my career, I definitely was curious about consulting. But then, once you get into an organization, I was in a rotation program that would drop me, every year and a half into a different role. So that was kind of feeding my ability to get a variety of experiences and to build a broad base of knowledge and understanding of the organization. So I didn't feel like I was pressed to make that change too quickly. But when the opportunity came, I definitely jumped at it because I was like, this is something new. This is exciting. I had changed to a different organization and was doing some of the same stuff. And it kind of felt like I was getting a little stuck. Like I was not challenged as much as I was hoping, or with the things that I was hoping to be challenged with.
Yeah.
There's always challenges. So when I switched to be in consulting, it really was, it was a little bit of shift because I also went right into life insurance from a healthcare background. That just happened to be the role that they were going to be going overseas with. So I started out in life insurance for about a year before going internationally, moving to Brazil and working there for a couple of years. During the time in Brazil, I shifted back to healthcare and started helping to support a few projects there and start looking for ways to grow a local presence down in Brazil. So that was really a great opportunity to feed both my, the foreign language side as well as the math side. So it really married a lot of what I was looking for together. But even when I came back from that international stint, having a variety of projects, a variety of clients, a variety of teams that I was working with was really an exciting way to keep that, keep everything fresh. Like you were always on your toes of like, oh, what are we doing this week, right? It wasn't that, okay, what are we doing this month? But day to day, week to week, you're always going to be doing something different. And I think that really appealed to me at that point.
When you left for Brazil, did you always know you wanted to come back? It sounded like you built up a community and a presence there. Did you ever consider staying?
No, we didn't consider staying. So I was lucky enough. My husband and I both went down with the same organization and we're working there together. So, we did find some friends and a community down there, but we always knew we'd come back. My family was back here. His family was back here. Like we knew at some point, we didn't have kids of our own at that time. So it was a perfect time to go down and explore. And then we actually came back pregnant with our first kids. So it was perfect timing to kind of come back and sort of reestablish, start your family, start that next season of life at that point. So
did you always know you wanted to work international, or was it an opportunity that kind of came up that excited you and you wanted to pursue it?
It just kind of came up. It was one of those things. My husband also had worked a lot internationally. He had been in the Peace Corps overseas. And in his first roles or his first organization that he worked with, he actually did work in Brazil for about 6 months. So he kind of got the bug at that point. And then, a couple years later, when the opportunity came up through the company he was working with at the time to start exploring the Latin American work, he was able to bring me over and we could do it together. So it wasn't something we sought out, but a lot of times that's kind of how your career can work, right? You have to just keep your eyes open for other opportunities that you're curious about, other opportunities that make you kind of go, oh, I didn't know that was an opportunity, that was an option. So keep yourself open to those kind of changes in your career.
I want to dig into that statement. Keep yourself open. As actuaries, especially through the exams in early career, right? Success is, again, a trade-off, right? Success happens at the expense of other things you could work on. Right. And so you have this like, okay, well, I'm doing the thing. I have a goal. I sacrifice for the goal. And the more I sacrifice, the quicker I get to the end of this very hard goal. And I often see actuaries come out of this exam process looking for that same level of certainty. And I think and I know also that through our careers, often the most progress we've made is pursuing opportunities we didn't plan for. And so, how do you reconcile this perspective change that's required? And then how do you weigh out opportunities where taking advantage of these opportunities often comes at the expense of a career or career opportunities you might have previously set as a goal for yourself?
Right. Well, I think we have to realize that what we measure, what we strive for changes over time. Like when I first started, my first role out of grad school, I wanted experience. I wanted money. Let's be honest. I wanted to get to a point where I felt financially secure, where I could take vacations and pay for them that I wanted, where I could pay off any debt that I had from school. I wanted to get my exams done quickly. So I was driven to use those as my markers. Am I getting the bonuses that I want? Am I getting the next promotions that I want? Am I getting good progress through my exams? Eventually, though, especially as my seasons in life started changing, I had to start reevaluating, do I have enough of X and I can start building over here on Y? I've realized over the years that we like to compartmentalize sometimes our career over on one side and our family over here, and maybe our social relationships here, and our health way over here. Like, we like to compartmentalize it because it kind of makes it easier to see and easier to manage each of them, but they're very interrelated. You can't succeed at one or push yourself too hard in one without causing some sort of unwellness in the other one, right? We've all, and I hate the word balance, but we've all known when we're putting too much energy in one thing or another, and it's because they are interconnected. But what I hadn't realized is that as we move through the different seasons in our life, whether it's, coming out of school, whether it's getting through the exam season, if you will, whether it's getting into, developing different family situations, whether or not you choose to have kids. Maybe it's just you want to ground yourself and be more involved in your community. Those all will change kind of your baseline of what you measure as successful at work, financially, at home, with your own health, all of that. So you're constantly redefining what success in each of these arenas of your life looks like.
What was a moment in your life where the definition of success changed fairly quickly, and all of a sudden it required a professional change? And how did you manage that? Like, okay, well, maybe I don't want this, and I want this thing over here. And now I have to kind of realign and rework myself and my skill sets and find new opportunities.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges that you ran into, and how did you navigate them?
Well, I can think of two distinct times when that happened. One was actually when I was still doing consulting. It was after we had come back. I had 2 kids now at home. I was still traveling a lot. I was still even going, to Latin America, and I would be gone for a week at a time. And I thought that was what I needed to be doing, because that had been my role in that organization, and that was part of what clients expected of me. That was part of what my team expected of me, and therefore it was part of what I expected of me. And I had this new, pull on the other side of, but I want to be home for the kids. I want to be spending time with them, seeing their first of everything, taking them to school on their first day, all of that. And I'm like, okay, how in the world can I do all this? And I realized that I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I have to make some decisions. And the decision that I made at that point was, I think I'm going to go back to the insurance world, where it's a little bit more stable or predictable, so that I can manage it and there wouldn't have as much travel involved, all of that. So that was one change where it was, okay, in response to a challenge that I was facing of, I need to reestablish some new structure here. But another time that it happened was at the very end of my actuarial work. And this was, again, kind of precipitated by some changes in the personal side. Kids were a lot older at this point, but so were the parents. So I was taking care of my mom, whose health was declining. We had my in-laws in town now, whose health was also, demanding some more of our attention. And also at the same time, I was also realizing that I wasn't getting the same, the same happiness out of, or feeling of accomplishment out of some of the technical work that I was doing. And I actually spent some time at that stage understanding what was going on. I took a step back, and true to actuarial form, I tracked all of my time, and I was like, okay, for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to take stock and make notes every day of what was I doing. Was it a client call? Was it working with other people? Was it spending time with the family? What, 15 minute to hour increments. What was I doing? Did that actually make me feel engaged mentally with what I was doing? Did I come away with it with more energy, or did I come away with it somewhat drained? Really paying attention to what was driving me at that point, and understanding that something in me had shifted, probably due to the natural course of growing into more leadership roles, where I really wasn't feeling like, delivering a great report or delivering a, knock it out of the park analysis of, a competitive market review was really the thing for me. But supporting the team at that point and helping those people, those actuaries, to feel better about what they were doing, to get through communication struggles better, to work together as a team better. All of that was where I was feeling engaged and energized. So I was realizing that somewhere along the way, me as an actuary had changed to me as a leader, me as a coach, a mentor, someone who's there to help other people be better actuaries. And so that then precipitated that shift away from the technical work and into what I do now, which is, coaching and facilitating and working with groups and just kind of continuing that area of actuarial work. Yes, because I'm still working with actuaries, but less spreadsheets.
Did you feel scared?
Oh, yeah.
To make those changes?
Yes, I did. But what I also realized, if I was not going to make the change, I had a feeling that 15 years from now, whenever I was sitting, in my retirement looking back and saying, why didn't I even try? Why didn't I take that step and show a little courage and do something that is outside of the norm? I knew I would regret not even trying.
It's interesting. So when we first got in this room, I pulled a book off the wall called Ego is the Enemy. And I was actually just at my alma mater, Illinois State, 2 or 3 days ago talking to the undergraduate students. And one of the things I was talking about was why I think students sometimes don't start preparing for their first exam. And I think it's ironically similar to why people, particularly actuaries that are risk averse, have a very hard time trying something outside of a very technical role. And it's that our ego fears failure, and it fears it in that it might invalidate some core tenet of who we believe we are.
Yeah.
Like, every actuarial science major was probably at the top of their math class. And to attempt to pass an actuarial exam and fail directly cracks that foundational characteristic of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, especially having gone through this process of years of taking exams and having sacrificed so much, it's a very a foundation shaking idea that, the company I've been working for, the role that I'm in, the job title of an actuary, to walk away or consider anything outside of this path is, all of a sudden, who am I?
Right. Right.
And did you ever have moments like that where you looked in the mirror and you're doing something so wildly different that it made you feel like you didn't, do I even know myself?
Absolutely. And that's, that fear is absolutely true. Like, I have this thought that, okay, if I stop doing actuarial work, 2 things. One, that removes an identity that I have had for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so Aree the actuary is no more. I don't know what that means, and that's pretty scary. And it also makes me think, wait a minute, does that mean that I was wrong 25 years ago? Did I make a mistake at the very beginning of my career? Should I never have done what I just spent all that time doing? And the answer is it's all part of the same path. It's all part of the process. You weren't wrong back then. It goes back to that idea of, having all these experiences. You just now have a lot of other experiences to build from and take in a new direction. You have a lot of skills that can be transferred to something new. You have a lot of perspective that you can use as you're helping other people in the next, stage of your life. Whatever it is, it's definitely not wasted time. It's all something that you are carrying forward with you. So once I came to terms with that, once I recognized that, it's just the next stage. It's like a book, where that chapter ended and now I'm moving on. Like, I get to carry all of my knowledge, all of my experience, all of my connections, my network, the people that I know, all are still going to be there as I move into the next stage. And that's something that I've realized that has really helped me as I move into new areas. So, I can lean on old connections. I can use my old skills. I can take what I learned as an actuary and as a project manager and apply that over here now. So it really helped me understand that it wasn't a matter of giving up on something, but building on something.
I kind of knew when I was young that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I don't know if I could have put my finger on exactly why it was or said, entrepreneur is the thing for me.
Right.
But I had a couple, I think, very innate characteristics and predispositions for it. I was very high risk tolerance. I was very comfortable not knowing, hey, is this going to turn out all right? And if it all falls apart, I'll figure it out. It's
right.
It's not going to be so bad. But as I, transitioned from the actuarial world out, I had college students say like, oh, I would like to be an entrepreneur. Like, I'd love to do the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
And one of the things I came back to was like, I can't do this had I not spent 10 years as an actuary. The
right.
stuff I learned, the exams that I took, the financial reporting, which, by the way, I'm going to push back. And that pricing is the true actuarial work and financial reporting. I think it's the opposite. I think pricing, you kind of use judgment and you're making some stuff up. Where like the financial reporting, you're like, are we actually making money?
Right.
Pricing just made some stuff up. They didn't actually know. I have to figure out if we're making money now.
Right. Right.
I do the real reporting, so I don't.
That's true. That's true.
Two sides of the same coin. But yeah, we had a joke at my first employer that said, if you want to learn how to do pricing, you should do in-force management. Because
right.
that's where you learn if pricing, the effects of pricing decisions, and it
right.
helps like inform
right.
the idea of what are the real risks and
right.
what are the consequences of being
right.
wrong. I was on a side story.
Ahead,
So
yeah.
I was hired to do this like executive training course for some technology company, some executives, and they were asking about actuarial assumptions, and I said, look, actuaries have never been right. Where there's never been a situation where an actuary was exactly
the
right.
Answer.
The question, the actuary's answer is just how wrong are we? And there's a degree of wrongness we're comfortable with, and we can move forward from there.
Right.
And I think that's a perspective and skill set that actuaries can utilize more outside of the actuarial field.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't know what the future is going to be, but to really assess the upside and downside, like, I'm comfortable being a little wrong here.
And I'm willing to take a safe or reasonable risk. I mean, when I made that shift out of being an actuary, because of everything I had done for the first 25 years, I was in a good financial position to jump over. And for my risk tolerance, which is probably a little lower than yours, I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this, and if I do fall flat on my face, I won't fall too far. I'll be fine. But yeah, even, I think there's a lot of some of what you talked about there that we don't realize how important it is to get other perspectives for ourselves. So the fact that I started out in the insurance world helped me when I moved to consulting, and my clients were insurance executives and insurance actuaries. I understood the world that they operated in. I knew what their relationship with underwriting and sales were. I knew what they were paying attention to in financial reporting and what, was important to them as an entity. But even as you were saying, on a smaller scale, I wish I had done more of taking some non-traditional roles. We had a few people that I knew who underwrote. They were underwriters for a year or two.
Yeah.
That gave them incredible perspective on, okay, why do underwriters think about risk so differently than actuaries? And, I even knew someone who kind of did a stint in sales. And it's like, that's a totally different, but it helps them understand, okay, why is sales always pushing back on me on my prices? Now you can get that perspective by stepping into there, or even just by spending time with them and talking to them and asking questions of, look, this, on paper, on our spreadsheet doesn't make sense. Tell me what you're seeing in the market as a salesperson, or tell me as an underwriter why you want to make this concession here, and how do you think about the risk of the whole block, right? So we can borrow that perspective, or we can go out there and get it ourselves.
So I've been working on a startup company recently, and I am the head of sales. And I had spent 10 years as an actuary, and the skill set changed. I mean, there was so much I needed to learn and understand about how to navigate conversations and build a pipeline and track information. But one thing that I realized very quickly as I brought in other people to help out was how deep my expertise as an actuary was at understanding the problem and the needs of our customers. And even though I had learned these other sales skills, it was truly that personal experience and being able to relate to people that was making me good at my job now.
Right.
But it reminded me of something else, this challenge that I go through. I think we go through it in any time of change, but particularly when we set off on our own, and that's being lonely. So when I had decided I was going to quit my day job, I had a mentor who, executive in the banking world, consulting, ran his own consulting firm, staffing agency, just a very well-rounded individual. And I told him, I think I'm going to quit, and I have, this company I want to start, the Actuarial Development Institute. And he said, wonderful, you're going to be great. Call me when you get lonely. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm going to go hire some people I really like. My clients are going to be my friends. But it's not like that. It is a very lonely thing when success entirely rests on your shoulders.
Right.
No one cares about it.
Right.
To the same extent you do, no matter who you employ or who your clients are. At the end of the day, the buck really stops with you. And so I was just curious if you've ever felt that way as you make transitions in your career.
Absolutely.
And how you deal with it.
Yeah, because as much as I am an introvert, I am somewhat social, but I also know, so coming out of my last actuarial role where I was jumping into being a solopreneur, I'm like, okay, I know I need people. I know I need to have people to bounce ideas off of. I need that kind of idea sharing thought partner people. So I immediately, within probably 2 months of going out on my own, found a community of, I was doing mostly coaching at this time, of coaches. So not coming from actuarial worlds, but, success coaches, physical coaches, people who were in that same area and had some of the same challenges. They were not like me, not necessarily a business-minded, obviously I knew business, but I didn't know how to run my own business. I hadn't, figured out, how do I do the marketing? How do I make all the right connections? How do I make sales? It's not intuitive for me. So it helped to have that community. And even the more people I talk to, actuaries who have started their own consulting firms, whether they stayed as one person or they grew to 5 or they grew to 30, they found a lot of value in finding other people like them who were going through the same challenges. So having someone who can say, all right, this really sucks. This part of my job is hard. How do I manage through that? Because that's also conversations that you don't always feel comfortable having with your immediate team, right? It's like, okay, I've got this really hard decision, and it might mean that I have to, let a few people go. Can't have that conversation with people on your team because it will stress them out and distract them. But if you have like a mastermind or a little community of people that you're like, okay, in our little, closed bubble here, can we talk about what's really going on and what some of the challenges are? And what are you doing to do this? Or it could even be like, I don't know what to do for, the right kind of insurance to get for my, organization now that we're just kind of small. What are you doing? Right. So having people that are going through something similar is very important. When I was in the actuarial career, I was surrounded by other actuaries and people that were doing the same thing and dealing with what I had. So that was just kind of inherent, and I never thought about how important it was to have that. But you can go out and seek it. You can go out and find that on your own if you don't have it.
Yeah, it's funny you point that out. I think that actuaries, especially those in like large companies that have rotation programs and big classes, take for granted that, like, oh, I graduated college and now here's my new group of friends. But you have that, right? From like kindergarten all the way through graduating college, you kind of have a cohort of people around your age going through similar experiences.
Yeah.
And in my first job, I did have, kind of a handful of actuaries that started at the same time as me. But I remember being like a very culturally, a thing that impressed me culturally is that all of a sudden I was now navigating multiple generations of coworkers. And that's something that we never experienced, in our early careers and early education, or not in early careers, but in our educational career. Yep. And so that was a transition you have to make. It's like all of a sudden, how do you navigate different people? But then there's a lot of people who graduate that do that same navigating people of different generations, but in a company of 20, a company of 30, where you don't have this community of people similar to you that are going through similar experiences, and communities really, especially if you're moving to a new town out of college, or you take a new job in a new city, or working remote.
I mean, trying to find that community and having those one-off conversations that would normally happen in the hallway, where you just kind of hear what other people are doing, disappears. Like it's hard to find the connection that you have, that you seek when you're not in the same room with people. So I think it's kind of changing sometimes. I know, some of the people I talk to that work remotely or, in a hybrid situation may still seek out some sort of community sometimes with people, just to have people around, go to a co-working space so that I can have, run into people and talk about, small talk. Like, what'd you do? Did you catch the game on Saturday? We miss that, and we don't realize how important that is in some of our day-to-day work.
And I think in remote work, it can almost be easy to take for granted that it takes work to build that and find it.
Yeah.
Another topic that I think we can maybe weave through this entire conversation is books. We both have read and are inspired by books. When did you really start reading a lot? Or if you consider yourself a big reader, did you do it while you were taking exams, before, or is it something that kind of started afterwards?
I think it started before. So my dad was a journalism and English professor. So
that'll do it.
We had so many books around the house at all times. It was very easy just to pick up a book off the shelf and stick your nose in it. My brother was a big reader. I'm a big reader. So it's always been there. I definitely didn't read as much during college, during early career when I was doing so much studying, which entails a lot of reading too. So I didn't do as much kind of reading on the fun side outside of what was on the syllabus. But eventually, once I got out of exams, I found that love of reading again, and I balance the nonfiction and the fiction. So I love, understanding human psychology and why do I think the way I do? Why does my brain work against me sometimes?
Yeah.
Like, it should be my friend, yet it has all of these biases that kind of point me down the wrong way, and it creates fear that stops me from doing something that's probably good for me to do if I could just get over that hump. But so now, over the last, 15 years, I'm very regularly reading a nonfiction book and a fiction book just for fun. So it's kind of always been around, and now I'm much more deliberate about it. I really miss it if I'm not reading something and learning something. I think it goes, we spend our early careers constantly learning, and we do have requirements for continuing ed, but taking the initiative to say, what am I really interested in? I want to learn more personally about human psychology. I want to understand where our motivations come from, why I behave the way I do, why I responded to that feedback the way that I did. I want to understand me and others and my team. Other people I know, want to dig more into like the technical side. I want to, get my arms around all of AI, how it works, what's going on behind the scenes, how does the math behind it and the algorithm behind it, like what all is that? So, figure out where you want to learn. But yeah, I think once you know what really you're curious about, you can find books, on any topic, which is fascinating.
I like that you mentioned reading a nonfiction and fiction book. This is something that I have really embraced, which is that reading is more important than finishing. And so having multiple books where one that just like almost feels magnetic to me.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be topical or useful, but it just draws me into reading and it keeps me in the habit.
Right.
But then also keeping something that's extremely intentional. Like there's something important going on in my life and I need to reflect on this. I need to progress, to learn something new. So maybe if you think back to some of your early career moments, was there ever a book you read that impacted you so much that it changed your behavior or perspective? Another story. So I was sitting with I was sitting with a college student. I was mentoring him, and I think he was leading me that like the exams were this big thing, and he asked, what have I accomplished in my life that has brought me the most lasting happiness? And I said, accomplishments don't make you happy. Accomplishments are passive. You're happy for a moment and they're gone. The only thing that has brought me lasting happiness is changes in perspective. And the most profound changes in perspective have always come from books.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to pin down one book. I think I already mentioned Range. That was a huge game shifter for me because it made me realize that I wasn't the wrong person for the job. I just had different skills. I had different abilities, and that was okay. And that actually could help me in the long run because I had been reading a lot of Malcolm Gladwell's.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, but I don't have this, this deep focus. So that was something that, I could see myself in. And I think when I can find a book where I'm like, oh yeah, this is me, and learn one or two things that'll take me to the next level, is very important. I think we have to be able to see ourselves in books, which we haven't talked too much about it, but I wrote my own book eventually. And
I've read it.
One of the best feedbacks and notes that I've gotten from people, I had the honor of joining a book club that had read The Sustainable Brain, and I joined them for the conversation. And, one woman said, I felt seen, like I could see myself in here. And, another one just said how it changed her perspective for what she was going through in her actuarial career. And I think that, like, to me, it was like, that's why I read books. And I was so happy to hear that that's what my book could do to someone else. So it's, it's to be able to feel seen, to be able to understand a little bit more about myself because of the perspective that somebody else has. I think that's what I love getting out of books.
One of my favorites was I was deciding whether to start investing in real estate. And I'd done a bunch of groundwork, and I had put a team together, and I'd written a business plan, and I had talked, I had a pricing spreadsheet. I'm an actuary.
Spreadsheet.
I had some brokers, and I was having a hard time taking the first step. And I was reading Ego is the Enemy. And one of the things it talks about in there is that perfection can be paralysis, and that this fear of failure prevents us from acting. And there was a Latin phrase in there, foxy facus. And I wrote it on a note card, and I kept it as a bookmark for a long time. And it just means do it if you're going to do it.
Right.
And I think we plan sometimes. We visualize what we want. We imagine what the future scenario might be like, where our life is better, or we're doing something that fulfills us more. But we don't take we don't take a step. We don't make progress towards it. And just for some reason, reading this book and reading through this chapter, it really affirmed this idea that if I just make progress, if I just start moving, if I really am going to do whatever, I should just do it right now.
Right.
and take that initial step. It helps me break through a lot of that initial fear, the jumping off the diving board, the talking to a stranger, the picking up a phone call to cold call someone, or writing this email to someone you've never met. If you're going to do it, just do it. You know?
Right. And what I had never realized is how much more nimble we can be when we start taking action, when we start getting into motion.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always adjust. It's like, okay, I picked up the phone that started off wrong. You can always say, hey, wait, that wasn't quite what I meant. Let me start again. You know, and it's awkward, but hey, we're actuaries. We're good at being awkward, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm okay being awkward now. I'm okay adjusting on the fly. But yeah, that first couple steps, and it doesn't have to be big steps. I do a lot of hiking out in Colorado. I am always on the trail on the weekends, and every time you go with a plan, you're like, I know where I'm starting, and I know, what peak I want to reach, or what waterfall I want to reach, or what, the loop is that I want to do. But always plan to have times in there where you stop and you look around and you're like, okay, that was a great leg. What's next? What are my options from here? I've got a new fork in the road. I didn't realize this trail was open now, or it's new. And what's down there? Maybe I want to adjust now, right? So we have to sometimes take enough action to get far enough down the road to see a different perspective so that we can make another informed decision. We like to plan all the way to Z, but sometimes we can just plan A, B, and C. And then by that point, we get there, and now we can see a couple different options.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me, another great book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, former international hostage negotiating lead. And I like books like this on sales and negotiating, one, because it's a useful skill set, but also all of it very much plays on human natural predisposition and ways of thinking. And one of the things he points out in this book that I reference to my wife all the time, especially when we're like buying a house, which is deadlines are never really deadlines. Right. Like whatever you think is like, oh, I can never come back from this. I can never recover. I can never change once this plan's in motion. That's usually wrong. Like you can actually change. You can be like, actually, you know what? We're going to do something completely different. Or, well, thank you for this offer, but I'm not going to take it unless we change X, Y, Z. Or, and so just like not getting too into the absolutist mentality of that the plan can never change, that, a mistake means that there's no recovery. Yep. And just being more flexible and forgiving and giving myself some grace sometimes.
Right.
That was a big mentality changer for me too.
Yeah. No, that's a good book.
So you mentioned Range.
Yes.
Other books that have been really impactful.
Other books really impactful. Once I got into doing more managing, Drive by Dan Pink, as far as understanding the variety of motivations that may be pushing people to act the way they are. So both internal and external motivators, both just to understand them, but also to help put things in place that will help the team move forward, help the individuals on the team move forward. Like, how can I motivate this organization, this team, to get the work done? Because it's not always going to be the money or, the title. It's like, you've got to understand that it's funny, when I was researching and talking to people for my own book, I ran across instances where one in particular stands out. I had 2 conversations with 2 different people, and one of them said, I hate it when someone says, it's just a job. Right? Because this is my career. This means a lot to me. I am here because I want to make a difference. Don't tell me it's just a job. And the other person said, yeah, it's just a job. I'm here because my family means more to me. My job is just here to pay the bills. It's interesting, but it's not everything. And I thought it was so interesting that those 2 people had kind of voiced like what the difference in motivators is for them. Like, one of them was very intrinsically tied to like making a difference at their work. It's not just a job to them. It was where they want to be, meaningful. And the other person was like, yeah, I want it to be interesting, but it is just a job. I want to be there for my family. And, understanding like how 2 people who are both extremely successful actuaries can have very different motivators, is just fascinating to me. And, we as as leaders, teammates, we need to understand where the people around us are coming from and where we are coming from. What is it today that motivates me?
That's what my next question was going to be, is as you read this book, Drive. So first question is, did you all of a sudden like feel like, oh, that is the thing that drives me, and it's I'm in this book. There's my persona right there. That's one. And then two is, I wonder how often, because I have personal memories of this in one of the companies I worked for, where I looked around and there were people that would work more hours than me and that were just so enthralled with the work they were in.
Yeah.
And I did not feel the same way. And it really, chipped away at my identity, going, oh, why am I so unqualified? Why do I just lack so much focus?
Yeah.
And I realized at least part of the answer to that was that I was driven by things that the things that drove me weren't there. I didn't feel passionate about what I was doing. And in fact, when I went to go out on my own, it was a huge existential crisis for me where, am I going to be motivated? Am I going to have, the drive, the intellect, the capability to be successful? And it's no challenge at all. I mean, as soon as I got out there, I was like, oh my gosh, I think about it when I go to bed. It's the first thing I wake up in the morning. Like I get to integrate every part of my, and it not like intentionally integrate, but just like it all comes together as part of this process of helping me achieve the goals I've set out to, because my incentives and my purpose were aligned. But I imagine a lot of people struggle where they're in work situations and they're not being successful, and they're looking around going, why is everyone else successful here? And it's not that there's some level of inadequacy with who they are,
Right.
but maybe an inadequacy of the environment for them.
Right. I've noticed a lot that if there is, a misalignment between kind of what you value as a person and what is exposed as the value, each company I've worked for has said, these are our values. This is what, we believe, but actions speak more than words, right? So if you're in a situation where what you value is different than what you're in, it may not be like super contradictory, but maybe it's just not there. You're like, I don't feel motivated because I don't feel like I'm connected to like the culture here, or the way that other people view this stuff. I think that's a big thing. I always thought I was behind because I didn't have that passion sometimes for what I was doing, and that was hard sometimes because we think we think we can see more. Like a lot of people that I thought were passionate about what they were doing were more extrinsically motivated. They just wanted to, be the best. They wanted to get the A+++. Like they weren't actually passionate about what they were doing. They were just kind of driven to, show that external marker of success. So I stopped trying to compare myself at some point because I was like, wait, I don't even know if this is really what they're measuring. So I think when I started, really just kind of paying attention to what is it that I want to be doing? How do I want to be making an impact? That's when I started making different choices for myself. But ironically, if I go way back to the very beginning of my career, so within probably the first year or two at Cigna, they did a lot of training for their actuaries and a lot of other people in the organization. And I was at a leadership development weekend, retreat at some point, and they brought in external provider to do the training. So we were in a big room, all sitting at our desks, watching the trainer up there go through the different exercises and talking about how it applied. And the guy I was sitting next to, who was actually an accountant, he leans over to me and he says, Aree, I think you're supposed to be the one up there teaching this. And I was like, that's stupid. I'm an actuary. Why would I be up there? And then 25 years later, that's what my job is, right? Yeah. So it's kind of funny how I think a lot of it is always in us. And sometimes a lot of people can see it more clearly than we can. We don't want to believe it because we have whatever identity trap that we've gotten stuck in. It's like, no, I'm an actuary. I can't be a leadership development person and an actuary. That's craziness, right? But it's possible, So you've got people that are, I can't be a salesperson and an actuary, but maybe you can.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
pay attention to what other people see in you too, because sometimes they can see you a little more clearly than you can. They can understand you.
So I'm head of sales. I'm building a sales team. I'm an actuary. No background in sales ever. Not even been a consultant before. Only worked at carriers. And so I've spent a year. I've managed to close some large contracts with large enterprises. I feel like I kind of have my legs under me, but it's, in my mind, despite the qualifications I have. And so I'm having lunch with someone who was hired with me on the same day of my first full-time actuarial job.
Yep.
And I made that same statement to him. And he just turns to me and he goes, if there was ever an actuary who could build a sales team, it would be you.
Right.
So I think maybe there is something to that, people might see us more clearly, and holding in our doubts aren't always, are often are at our expense. And we should trust the other people who know us well, and exposing ourselves to other people to get some of that feedback, to help recognize maybe there are places that our range can be more useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that to look at that from the other perspective, that puts the onus on us also throughout our careers to tell people what we see in them, to tell our team, to tell our peers, to tell our colleagues, hey, I noticed this about you. You communicated effortlessly with, that client. You defused this really tense situation by asking great questions. We need to tell people when we see the strengths that they have coming through, because we don't always notice it.
That's an interesting piece of leadership feedback, because I feel like we're often wondering what we did wrong, where we fell short, where do we need to focus and improve?
Yeah.
Because we have maybe a false sense that we know what we're doing well, but maybe there's a lot of things that we're doing well that we don't recognize at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we don't recognize the value in what it is. For the longest time, I've been known as, and am still known as, a very calm and grounded person. And in a world,
that energy right now.
In a world full of extroverts, or a world where the loudest person in the room usually gets the most attention, I felt like I was handicapped because of that person that I was. And over the career, I realized that I would get pulled into situations because I was calm and grounding. I would get pulled in as, hey, I don't need your help on this project. Can you just be in the room and help listen to what both sides are saying and help me interpret why this is hard for this? So it took a while to accept the fact that, oh my gosh, that isn't a detriment. That is actually a serious strength that not everybody else has. But because it was something different, because it was not what I saw other people, because it came easy to me, it didn't feel like a strength, right? But what felt like a strength was what I saw other people going, oh my God, how did you get that? How do I get that? But
that's such an interesting statement you made, is that it came easy to me.
Yeah.
And, again, relating this back to actuaries, right? The exams are hard. Success comes from things that require effort and are difficult. And so
that's what we tell ourselves.
Yeah. So the only way I could possibly be successful in the future is through doing. I couldn't this thing that just comes so easily to me couldn't be valuable.
Right.
Right. That is so interesting.
That's
I haven't
cheating.
thought about that.
I shouldn't have to. I have to work hard to get what I see as success, what I feel should come to me. But yeah, that's a lie that we've told ourselves. There are elements of you that are absolutely valuable, and you didn't have to work hard to develop them. They're just there. Figure out how to use them. Figure out where those apply well.
Or maybe it's easier to develop because it's fun to develop it.
Yeah.
You enjoy learning about it. You're naturally drawn to it. And so, because it doesn't feel so effortful, then it must not be very hard and anyone can do it. But it, maybe it's just easy for you. That's fascinating. Yeah. That's fascinating. All right, one more. How about at least one more book?
Oh, the other book, and this one isn't. It's a little bit broader in topics, but it's called The Extended Mind. It's by Annie Murphy Paul. And it talks about how we think in space, how we think in relation to each other, how we think in different situations. And so it's not about like how to do this better, but it's how to understand that, the space that you create at your desk so part of it, and I'm sure we've all seen, the stereotypical, like, there's been studies even that say if you remind a woman that she is female, if you have stuff out there that says, a reminder that hey, you're a woman, they will score less on math exams. They will score lower in like the STEM fields. If you remind them that they are Asian, they score higher. The same person. So we can set up our environments with things that remind us of who we want to be, of the skills that we have, of whatever. Like, so the book talks about like all these just little mind tricks that we can do, not even tricks, but just, boosts that we can do to help us think better, to help us use these amazing brains that we as actuaries, rely on. How do we do that better?
Mm. I'm assuming you've read Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
It reminds me so much of like visual primers of things that activate your brain in order to incentivize certain behaviors. The most impactful books by my measurement are Changes in Perspective and then Permanent Changes in Ongoing Behavior. Changes in perspective I find are very rare and very powerful, that when I find one, it very much resonates to me. So Foxy Facus, like I kept it with me. It was everywhere. Another one was this idea of that we have so much more control over our thoughts. And so I just came in a bit of a confrontational household. We would argue and debate. And so I found that throughout my whole life, I argued in my head when I was driving alone in the car, when I was sitting by myself at my desk. Yeah. And I read this part of a book that was like, it's not normal, and that you have the capacity to change it. And so I left a Post-it note on my car, and it just said, "Stop arguing in your head." And then I left one on my desk, on my screen at desk, because I meant between those two, that's like 12 hours a day, in the car or at a desk.
Right.
And I don't do it.
Yeah.
I don't argue in my head anymore.
Yeah.
It took like 2 or 3 months, but it was gone.
And it's just a little thing.
Yeah.
It's just a little thing.
Just
I have a couple little notes that I keep up. One actually says now. So going back to like, just do it now. Like now. Go ahead. If it's in your head, if it's easy to do, just do it now. Keep yourself moving. But it's not, we always are looking for the hard solution. It's not always tricky. It's not always complicated. It's not always even, going to take a lot of time. Like there are small things that we can do at any point that can help us.
But it's not always obvious what we should do. And I think that's a challenge that people run into. And so Ego is the Enemy, Ryan Holiday. The other book that I've read by him that was life-changing is Stillness is the Key. And he instilled 2 behaviors that I do virtually every single day. And so the first one is, within an hour of waking up, the first hour I'm awake, basically every day, I don't look at my phone. Meaning like when I wake up, I don't look at it. Right. I don't turn on the radio. I don't turn on the television. I don't turn on my computer. Yep. I don't allow anyone else to send input to my brain.
Right.
And I take the dog out. I do dishes, something. I make coffee. And then the second thing I do, still in the same hour, is I sit down with a journal and I just write what's on my mind. And so all of these kind of like pieces of advice, like recognize when things aren't going well and identify things that you like and find a community. You don't always recognize you need them if you don't have time to reflect.
Right.
And I imagine like going for walks, right, for these extended walks where you're away from everything and you have peace and alone time with your thoughts and your brain. And I forget where I was reading. I'm reading a book called The Self-Driven Child about being a better parent, right, and raising good kids. And one of the things it talks about is that children, just like all of us, need purposeless time, free time
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
reflect on the things we've gone through and then imagine what we want our futures to be. And if we're so scheduled and we're so busy and we're not, and especially in today's world, it's so easy to be distracted and just do anything that
Right.
isn't reflect.
Right.
But that stillness is the key, an hour away from any stimulus, and then writing and reflecting on
Right.
the thoughts that are going through my head. I've been doing it for like 7 years now, and I can point to it as the source of virtually every personal change and life decision I've made that's positively impacted my
Yeah.
life.
The writing is key, and that's something I didn't do enough of because it takes time. But any time that I'm struggling or even with just a decision, if I just start writing down, not intending for anyone else ever to read it, I probably will never go back and read it, but just getting it out of my head, because things can move so fast in there. Like it slows it down, and you're like, oh, well, duh, this is my answer, right? But if we take that time to slow it down, to write it down, and put some sort of order to it, it gives us that perspective. It's like, and again, there's a lot of studies on like just that distance from your head to there. Like you can see it a little bit more clearly. You can respond to what you're writing down instead of just having it constantly spin in, well, what about this? Oh, but if I do that, then this, and then all of a sudden your brain's gone down 6 different paths. But writing it down makes you.
It's so funny.
look
I
at
wonder
it.
if it's an intellectual thing with actuaries that we just think fast.
Yeah.
But I laugh because it sounds preposterous, but writing things down with your hand, right?
Oh, it has to be.
Not on a
It has
keyboard.
to be writing.
It forces you to slow down.
Yeah.
And I just don't know. I mean, maybe you can do it if you're good at meditation, but it's great.
Right.
But it's not the same.
Right.
There's something about that forced slowing of your thoughts.
It's a different kind of meditation, I think.
Yeah, that's
really
a good
do.
way of putting it. A
I
different
really
kind.
do. So, question: when you read, are you reading on paper or are you reading electronically?
Always on paper.
Me too.
Yeah,
Almost
I have a
always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I read
If
articles and emails.
I'm
and
almost never
I work on a computer.
Right. I'm never reading a book. Sometimes I'm listening to a book. I'll get the audiobook sometimes. But yeah, my preferred way is always reading. And I think I remember it better. And I can picture like, oh, it was about 2/3 of the way through the book and it was on the upper right side, this piece that was talking about something that resonated with me. Like, the mental picture of where things are is easier, so I can retrieve it better. So yeah, I always go for the paper.
So just
copy.
to plug Ryan Holiday one more time. I haven't read it yet.
Is Ryan paying you?
No, he should be. Ryan. But his newest book is called Wisdom. I haven't read it yet. I haven't even got it. But it's the 3 aspects of it. Like he breaks things down into 3s. Ego is the rise, the mountain, and the fall, right? Those are the 3 places that ego will there's challenges with each one.
Yep.
So wisdom is learn, apply, repeat. And so when I read, I don't read fast. I'm not good at it. I mean, if it's a fiction book or it's something really, or a history, I could just eat it up. But these books that are really thoughtful like this, I can only read like 5 pages maybe at a time.
Yeah.
And then I have to journal on it and think about like, what is this telling me? And is there something I should do in my life? And particularly books like The Self-Driven Child that I'm trying to read more and more about being a parent and understanding my kids. And then I have to stop and think about like, what should I be doing as a parent? How should I be changing my behaviors or our structure of the day to help be more supportive and help my kids be successful? And I think we need to do that same intention with our careers, right?
Absolutely. We should look for ways to experiment. And so I have a LinkedIn newsletter that I put out every 2 weeks, and probably this spring I put one out on how to read nonfiction. Like, how do we learn? How do we make changes? And it boils down to, we can't just read from page 1 to page 268.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we can look at the table of contents and go, okay, this chapter looks like it resonates. We can jump around. We can kind of say, okay, if you're dealing with the ego, right, the rise, the peak, and the fall, like, what are you dealing with today? You don't have to read from front to back in nonfiction. You can jump around. You can pause. You can say, oh, this really struck with me, and I want to try and experiment with how to do this differently in my life. Right? There's a lot of rules that we can break when we're reading nonfiction, and that's a lot of the fun. It's like, especially if you want to get something out of it, if you want to initiate some sort of change, you've got to build in that practice of, okay, I'm going to do this differently. Okay, it didn't quite work. Maybe I should go back and read that chapter or, talk to somebody about it or journal about it. It's like, okay, this didn't quite work. I tried X, Y, or Z. Here's how it turned out. You might be able to see what did or didn't work or what's getting in the way. So, yeah, how did, if it's a book on negotiation, how did that last one go? What did you apply? What didn't you apply? What worked well for you? What felt more comfortable for you? Like, there are a lot of books and, speakers and whatnot out there, mentors sometimes, or people that are giving us advice. And I think we always need to take part of it, take 50% of it, take some portion of it, but then add our own experience, our own bend, our own perspective, and make it our own. It's like, okay, yeah, this book tells me to do it exactly in this recipe, but I know that I'm much more, suited to doing this piece a little differently. This one makes me cringe. I don't like, the way that they're telling me to, approach people. Whatever it is, figure out what's most, more like you and insert that and say, okay, how can I make this myself? How can I make this me? And then it will stick more. It will be unique because it's more you, but it's grounded in some truths that came out of that book.
I love that. We're getting close to time. So we both are former actuaries,
Yes.
but we both love and work with actuaries, right? We want to support them in whatever they want to pursue. Two questions. So what's the most underrated part of being an actuary? And what's the most overrated part of being an actuary?
Oh my gosh. The most underrated part of being an actuary, I think it's the relationship side. I think we look at actuaries as kind of the technical brains behind a lot of the work we do, but I think we forget that there's the people that are connecting, and that's what's really building our ability to do the work well, to get the work out there and have it make an impact. The most overrated side, I don't know. I think we're not as nerdy. Well, yeah, we are. Never mind. No, I don't know. I think it's hard because to some degree, I'm like, are actuaries overrated? Are they like, what's the big assumption that people make about actuaries? It's that we're the smartest ones in the room. I don't know. Maybe that's maybe the overrated part is we aren't. At least not in in everything. We have a lot of knowledge here, but we have to recognize that other people have pieces of the puzzle, and we have to put it together. We have to help people put that puzzle together.
I remember my first week at my first job, they brought me to some ops person and they asked me a question. And they're like, oh, this is Charlie. He just started working here. He's in the actuarial department. And the person goes, oh, well, he must know everything already.
Right. You're like, what?
I don't know anything.
Right.
And then any parting advice that you want to give to listeners?
The parting advice is something we've talked about already. Is this is your career, your path, your life. You get to make it what you want. So look for opportunities, follow your curiosity, and allow yourself to not fit the mold.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Aree. And that's
it's my pleasure.
And that's it for the Actuarial Development Institute podcast.